Welcome. So hello, welcome to the Amaze 2022 Transformation Passport, where we have August, which is the Co-Creator space, port of call, where we're going to be talking about enamoring the users. And I am Elizabeth Lembke, your Chief Talent Navigator and of Transforming Talent, and your guide and mixologist for today's session. And joined together by the wonderful Anne-Cécile.
Hello. I'm here, happy to be mixing some drinks with you too in life. We call it real life, or maybe not. I'm a change and organizational developer, and I help people like find their drinks, but in work, so that they're happy.
I love it. And we're joined by the soapbox and work pirate extraordinaire, Michelle Minnikin.
Hello.
And then we have the wonderful, on the other side of the table, Hanna, here as a guest mixologist and giving the insights as to how does this play out as work from her own point of view, as well as the drinking point of view. All right. So with that, the whole idea behind the August and the co-creator of is really about how are we understanding this aspect that Clayton Christian talks about in terms of customers don't buy products, they hire them to do a job. And what happens quite often when organizations or teams come up with amazing products, and it's this whole thing about, well, why aren't they buying them? Why aren't they adopting them? And we shove them at them, and for some reason, they don't want to go around with that change. And so Anne-Cécile and I, Co-Creator Space was a project that we did between 2019 and 2020 around, is there a better way of teaming and innovating so that really people look into that plurality of thought and understand how can we bring these things together? So when we're talking about enamoring the users, it's really about how do we get that perspective of what's the job that we're asking something to do and how do we design for that? So with that, we are going to dive right in. And we are going to start with the important thing that our French woman is going to talk about first.
Yes, and it's principles, because if you don't have principles, what do you have? No. The idea we had when we worked together, and we're still working together, is that if we work as a team, it's important to have shared understandings of what is acceptable, what's not. And the first thing is everything must start with desire. Like you have to want it. Anything that you have to change, anything that you want to learn, it comes after. Like the learning, the skills development, it comes when we want it. And so that's the first principle: desire first, and the rest comes. Your turn.
All right, perfect. The next one is value creation in a volatile world. So this whole aspect of what do people really want is how are we looking at the users? So what would they be thankful for and actually need that you're offering? So when we're looking at quite often organizations, they have a product and they tend to at some point fall in love with the product because they've put so much thought and use, and why aren't people taking it? And this is that aspect, is the only one who can understand what value is the person actually using it. And so how do we understand what the customer actually needs, and can we work backwards from that? So looking at what maybe they say they want something, but what do they really need? Sometimes those are two different pairs of shoes.
Exactly. And one other principle that is important for us is to see that anything that is happening, and the lucky or the funny stuff is we spoke about the world being changing all the time, and uncertainty is the new black. We didn't know Corona was coming, and it will bring so much uncertainty for everyone. and that the social part, the part of being adaptive, of looking at people and working for people on a personal level would be that important. And so this change from having a hard product, something that we really want to force, into, okay, let's be soft, let's speak to the people, let's see what they really need and want, and let's train to become more humans and focus on that.
Exactly. And this aspect of also when that gets infringed upon, what are those, what are those detriments? And that goes into the next one, which is that aspect of not everything needs to be an innovation. There's definitely been over the love of the last couple of years of innovate or die. Well, have we truly innovated? Oftentimes, and this is where it's really about not everything must be an innovation, but everything is subject to evolution, because how has the context changed? How have the needs changed? How have the paradigms, how have the ideas as to what good is? How do those things change? And so here, this aspect of how everything evolves is absolutely critical to how things continue to grow.
And as a last principle, but an important one, it's talking about technology, because we are using technology all the time. And it's important to remind ourselves that people are working with the technology. And so the technology should be working for the people and not vice versa. And focusing on humans and adapting the technology to human needs instead of trying to adapt people to the technology, which is really hard.
Exactly. So what Anne-Cécile and I did when we were looking at Co-Creator is how do we bring these principles into work around how are people collaborating? What are they understanding? What really is truly the job to be done? And how are we using this as a baseline for creating better fulfillment and life at work? And we had fun with it, because one of those things is play is the best way to build upon different ideas. And keeping in line with that, this is where we want to open it up. And this aspect of what is not working. And right now, as we think about fun at work, we think about fulfillment at work. What are some of the pain points that we might be experiencing? So here we put out a couple that here product and customer needs are not aligned, hybrid and post-pandemic transformation, there's a bit of confusion. The vision and values that are on posters don't necessarily match the behaviors. What else?
We have the problem with the focus on efficiency, and it comes with a very hefty price tag, meaning we focus only on that and then we are obsessed with it. We are afraid of taking risks, and it's even censored, like you made something, no, don't take a risk, stay home, don't drink alcohol, whatever. We also have the reward of thinking inside of the box, saying, okay, we've done it all the time this way. Why change? Like, we don't have, like, it's okay to stay the same way we did like 20 years ago. Sometimes decisions are made far away from the real problem. Like, you are in pain, you have problems, and the decision is taken from someone else who doesn't have a clue about the problem itself and who doesn't know how to solve the problem.
Exactly. And then this is some of those other ones are skills you want are not on the market, but also not in your workforce. How will we develop for them? Or we'll just lay off everybody because they don't have what we need. And so that really comes into this last piece of what is the fear and loathing of what is my future in work. And so I'm going to stop share and just kind of put it around to all of us as you think about here. I'm going to come over to you, my dear. As you think, wait. Oh, I'll go behind you.
No, you can go behind you. No, it's just
stay alive.
I'm going. All right. So as you think about pain points at work or in the world of work, what are the ones that you think about? Michelle? Work pirate extraordinaire.
I would say the thing that I've been hearing most about at the moment is burnout.
Mm-hmm.
that and in the UK, with inflation set at 10% now and looking to go 18%, wages not actually keeping up with inflation. So we've got a client at the moment who did a normal, every year type of inflationary increase, but it's not enough. Because it's a decrease for people. So it's that kind of, how do you balance sort of survival of the business during an upcoming current whatever recession versus making sure that your people are okay as well. So there's lots of things that we're looking at the moment.
And this, absolutely, because it's that aspect of what is the uncertainty. If everyone knew these elements of inflation is coming, here we bounced back. Everything was back to normal in the pretend. That was definitely with the bunny ears. And now with all these crises going around and the extremes, it's really that the infrastructure challenges and where we haven't been making investments socially and publicly are all biting us in the butt at the same time as the social and upheavals.
The UK is on fire. So we've got political instability, we've got economic uncertainty, we've got, I think, our first sort of glimpse of what climate change looks like as well, and the Brexit stuff. The NHS isn't coping. So and people aren't going to. So unlike in other European countries, our gas bill is going to times by 5. And we've got prime ministers getting on planes to go to Ukraine just for his jollies rather than actually dealing with the problem. And we've had a 6-week painful process of choosing our next prime minister, and we don't get to choose anyway. It's just rich people. So it's just horrific. So people in the UK, we're not okay, man. We're not okay.
Like you're going slowly down.
But you still have your humor. Yes, exactly.
It's like, can we come and live at your house?
The house is burning, everything is burning, and we don't know what to do. And I think the important part when we think about pain points is that's also the time when we find our true strength. Because when there is no option left, then we have to find those, like the opportunities that we couldn't see before. That's the only moment, like everyone can come together if if you have a good leader, we can bring people together, or a leader can be born. That's the hope.
Yes, I think there's going to be trouble ahead.
There's going to be trouble ahead, and it's that aspect of what will then emerge out of that trouble, or out of, there's always that theory of the revolutions come when when the struggle is so real that there can't be anything else than to adopt and go into change.
Yeah.
But yes, it's making sure that the change is good for people, not for those in power.
And I think, and this is where I think this is us as social psychologists, the amaze in terms of transformation. What can we do? So those aspects of how do we actually affect what's in power and creating systemic change, that it is possible. And I think this is really at a cusping point of what are we doing things for, rather than just looking at the technology and the tools that we're doing it with. Currently, this is actually something that really made me excited about a customer who came back from the board, because these philosophical questions as to what are we going to do when X, Y, Z. And it's like, exactly. What kind of organization do you want to be? And are you going to make those choices? If this is truly your principle, are you going to make those choices in accordance? Or are you going to go in face of that? Because if you go in face of that, everyone's going to see it. And then it's going to be the poster fodder of, you say this is what you want, but these are the actions that you actually do. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where the gap can be missed. Like,
yeah, precisely. And so it really is this aspect of how are we understanding what the context creates the need, contrast creates the meaning, in terms of how do we find a way through as to what could truly help and what would truly make a difference. So Hanna, anything to add there from your side, and particularly your work experience?
Well, regarding the problems in workspace from maybe both, like, okay, let's start at the beginning. That there are two sides to the problem. Like, what is the problem from the company side and the employer side, and also the employee side? And sometimes they do not match. Sometimes they match, sometimes they don't match. I think from employee side, maybe something that I would fill into the blank point would be that in my experience, there are very, very many employees that do not have the feeling of being seen and their work being seen and actually acknowledged.
Yes.
Which would be so easy to fix, but doesn't seem to be, because it's like a very, very common problem that I see from colleagues, from companies that I worked in, but also from a lot of friends that tell the same thing about their work. So I think that is one thing. And then from employer side, sorry, I think a pain point is the lack of actual workforce getting worse and worse. I think it's at least true for all over Europe. There are probably countries in the world that don't have the same problem, but here it most certainly is one. Also, Brexit didn't make it better, because like there are a lot of, there's less exchange than used to be. But in general, we do have a demographic upside down pyramid. Enforcing it in the upcoming, or that will enforce the problem in the upcoming years. And I see a lot of employers and companies in need of, well, you hear a lot of employer branding needs to be better. How do we get where do we source our employees? I also read a lot about it in for example, my LinkedIn feed. It seems to be the latest shit that everybody's talking about, where to post. Well, and what annoys me is that I mostly see the discussion being about where to source employees in the sense of where to put my advertisement, rather than thinking about how can I be more attractive as an employer and what can I do to, and it's more than employer branding, because it's not only about, like shiny pictures and advertising how cool one is, but rather about really having a culture and living up to that culture that most of the time doesn't exist, at least yet.
Yeah, retention is a huge problem at the moment. But everybody we work with. So it's like, stop focusing on buying new people, focus on the people you have.
100%. That goes back to what Hanna was saying about the recognition and being seen of what you're doing and how are you actually being communicated with. And this is that aspect of, you're completely right. It's not about how are you being attractive in terms of the pretty pictures. It's how do you follow through on this aspect of careers really do look good here. We're in ambiguous, challenging times. How are we banding together? At the beginning of Corona, there was, on the one hand, not a lot of changeover, but there was also that aspect, okay, what is my safe haven? What is my safety haven? And now these, particularly with the recent waves of layoffs that are happening to a lot of our friends, it really is that when times are tough, how are we really understanding what we're doing and what we're going about? And this all ties into this kind of love of growth and scale up without this question of what's the job to be done? What's the real need behind? Why does our organization exist? And so when Anne-Cécile and I were working on this, we really, in our interviews, so many people were in love. We just said they're in love with their product or services. This aspect of understanding, what does the customer need? What's behind that need? Maybe they say something because that's what they've heard about, like, oh, I need this from Cornerstone or talent management or whatever it is, and they want to buy a tool or a system without even understanding what their problem is. And not even understanding, will this actually help the problem to be solved, to be more effective and be viable as an organization? And so that's one of the reasons why this aspect of how do we get down to what are the fundamentals of what's the job to be done? Because there's a need out there. There's a need that needs to be serviced, and the best organizations are able to service those needs. But how do we get away from the tactical, what are we doing on the daily, so that we can really deliver on that? And so that we can really also give those free spaces towards fulfillment around impact, growth, and relationships that people want to have towards fulfilling work and have trust in their employers again, and that consumers actually have trust in the brands again.
Yeah. And I think one point that I see a lot of time when I discuss with CEOs or anyone who has a certain level of responsibility, is that they don't even think about the fact that their employee can learn a new skill. Like they're, well, he's in marketing, you can't do anything else. You can transfer skills, you know, you can help people learn new stuff if you find out what they really, really want to do. And it's, again, who's the user's user? At the end, it's the client who's going to buy the product or service, and who is in contact, who can do what, and reorganizing the way we create value.
Yeah, precisely. And so this aspect of how are we really understanding what does value look like? What does it feel like? That's where it's that, how do we get it into looking at how are we changing the habits of what a good, of what good value looks like, so that we can recognize it when we see it. Users of why is it so important? What is that buy-in? What is that understanding? And how each of these different arguments as to what's important to me, how are we putting them onto the table to really understand what's our hook? What's our contribution, and how can we get then folks on board for really getting those pieces then together? So with that, my dear friends, context creates meaning. And then when people don't see the struggle, then the struggle isn't real. So how do we make it real? So with that, this was Elizabeth Lembke, Chief Talent Navigator, Chief Mixologist of Transforming Talent of the Amaze Journey, together with my wonderful co-captain,
Anne-Cécile Graber from SA Management Solutions, ACG, sorry, Management Solutions.
Perfect. And with that, we are now going to go into post-production and say that's a wrap. We are going to be stopping recording now.
Now, yes.
Yeah.